Greetings, it is I, your archivist, and today we'll use my methodology to solve a particular problem. And if you have no idea what my methodology is, and words like axioms, postulates, and propositions make you scratch your head, then check out the link above or in the description below, where I lay out my entire methodology, my systematic approach to crafting better worlds. Now, with that being said, if you do know what my methodology is and you have a fair understanding and you feel like you're ready, then let's use that methodology to make you and I a better world builder. And so instead of talking about a general process, meaning that we are going from this general idea of, okay, how do I solve or create interesting and complex cultures in an efficient manner? See, that's kind of broad. There's not as much defined in it. I could do this in 1,000 different ways to get to a particular resolution. But in this sense, we're going to do a more particular problem. And the problem is, in a medieval society where magic is used to enhance agricultural productivity, does the reliance on magic lead to long-term social and economic stability or instability? Now, if you'll notice, there are some particularities within this question, such as medieval society. I typically write science fantasy, but if I were going to say XYZ science fantasy society, then oh my God, I'm going to have to do all this work and going, here's how all these things are defined out, and this is the kind of tech or magic that they have access to. So in this case, it's good that I'm going to operate outside my normal wheelhouse to solve this particular societal problem, right? So this particular setting. But you'll also notice that there's ambiguity in here where it says magic. Well, what is magic? Like, what do you mean by magic? Is it hard magic? Is it soft magic? You know, spoilers, but we're going to do a hard magic system because, one, that's more my wheelhouse. Two, I have no clue how you would do a soft magic system. If you think you can solve that, comment down below with your resolution to this problem. Now, so there are specificities and still generalities within this. So I'm going to go through one way of solving this problem. So here we go. So our first presumption and axiom in this case is going to be that the magic system is hard and that it requires a resource. Okay, so I've cut a bunch of things away. And if you watch my Worldbuilding 101, you understand negation is one of the best things that you can ever use. Let's immediately negate a bunch of stuff so we know we don't have to deal with that anymore through exclusion, and we can focus in on this stuff. Okay, so now it's a hard magic system and it's a resource. Great, I've eliminated 99% of the possibilities of things that it could be. Fantastic. So being a resource, which we could also assume that there is a need for a resource to have a geographical location and there to be logistics to get it from one geographical location to another. Makes sense so far. Okay, so given those two presumptions, let's presume that the resource is natural with magical application, meaning it's like coal, but if you're bad, Santa makes it magic coal that crawls up your butthole when you get it during Christmas, and then, I don't know, you get colon cancer or something. Like, that's terrible. Why would Santa do this? Anyways, it's so terrible. Why was that the thing that I came up with? All right, so it's natural. It's something natural, but there's an application to be applied on top of it. This could be like something like copper and alchemy, right? Where you're trying to take lesser metals and then turn them into gold. Okay, there you go. So it's natural. Okay, so that means that then there's a production process, which means that now you need knowledge and you have to have an infrastructure in place to produce the magical artifice in this case, or the magical resource to refine it. Okay, so if you have to have knowledge, then that means that you have to have a specialization, meaning specialists who know how to make the process work, right? How do we build the factory that makes the magic stuff go, woo? All right, so then we can presume that an ordinary person couldn't figure out how to create it on their own. Reasonable enough. It takes a specialization. There's some sort of knowledge that would hinder them from just copying it. So this could be a recipe. That's where I chose to go with this. Which then, what a recipe is a knowledge of required steps that you've got to do, right? Simple enough. So from here, and by the way, we had a recipe, which is a particular. So we have worked our way from axioms, generalities, to layers of particulars. Now, you could lay out these as axioms and go this, and then over to this and all that. The way that my brain happened to run in this moment was just step to step to step, peeling back the layers of generality. But again, you can set it up however works for you. So we have a recipe. And so if we have a recipe, then I think it's safe to presume that there are other ingredients that are required, be that magical energy with the natural resource, or the natural resource with magical energy and other mundane ingredients, or magical ingredients with the natural ingredients with natural. You get what I'm saying. It could go on and on and on. How specific do we need to make this recipe, or complex actually is the right word to say. So from this, I generated a list of questions. 1, who controls the resource? 2, who controls the production? 3, who controls the specialized knowledge? 4, who knows and understands the recipe? Okay, now I'm going to take all this and we're going to synthesize it into a proposition, which is going to be a guild owns everything. Then they have unprecedented power. They have the resource, the production, the knowledge, and the recipe. They have complete control over the situation and are a powerful force within the kingdom. Okay, sounds like a great setup for conflict, right? So now we need to ask ourselves, how do they protect themselves? Okay, let's go this route. Do they hire mercenaries? Well, then how do they keep the mercenaries in line? Well, then how do they handle foreign influences not coming in and buying out the mercenaries? Well, then, and actually this should connect to this. So then do they allow the mercenaries to be part of the transactions? Or do they pay them a percentage fee? How do you keep the mercenaries happy? Okay, let's go down to this one because this comes in together. Do they have an alliance with the government, ensuring control through military support? Does this cause workers to be seen as units of production instead of citizens by the leadership? Again, more conflict, which is, what our stories are made off of. What if it's both, that they hire mercenaries and the government's involved? Okay, well, so do they have the mercenaries that they hire guard the facilities while keeping the king's guards at the mines and transport of resources? Splitting up their potential problems by balancing their risks against each other, meaning the mercenaries and the king's guards. An attack on production hurts the kingdom. An attack on the mines hurts the mercenaries' pay. So you counterbalance them to make them work for each other. You could then have this thing where, the mercenaries know one part, because you're always going to have espionage. And then at the other time, or on the other hand, you have the king who understands, these are the resources that they need, but doesn't have the other. Again, layers of conflict. Does the king and the mercenaries work together? Well, maybe, but there's a couple other things that we could work out. Okay, well, how do they keep those outside, like the king's guards and the mercenaries? How do they keep the outsiders from, those who don't know, from figuring out what the recipe is? Well, so do they have the recipe in another language that only they understand? Or is it a cipher that can only be unlocked with certain mechanisms? Who knows? Well, there's another hypothetical that we could come up with. For instance, do they induct young men into their guild, using them as warriors and then as academics? So you don't even need mercenaries or King's Guard, because then you take these young men, you make them the warriors that then become academics. As they ascend through the ranks, they change from one position to another, though those who don't have the acumen for the finer intellectual capacities that lend themselves to the alchemical practice, again, there's an assumption that this is an alchemical practice now, that could be useful in the guardianship or strategy. So you don't just say, in this organization that the only value is understanding how to make the recipe, that it is understanding how to make the recipe in conjunction with being able to protect it. And both of these are valuable to the organization. Or what if instead the guild were neutral and it was operating across multiple kingdoms? Okay, interesting idea. This would then propose that there's widespread power, able to manipulate various kingdoms across their territory, right? Because this makes growth, like of agricultural stuffs, you know, the agricultural stuffs. This allows, like, for instance, if you know medieval era, like your armies and you'll be able to move them depends on your rations. Well, what if this stuff, and we never define this out, right? This is just all mind games or a thought experiment, as it were. What if you could just take these crystals and throw it in the ground with a seed near it, and it causes them to grow like in 10 minutes or in a day? It's like, God, you could have an army. You come in with your army and you set up an area, you kind of build out your camp, and then in the middle of camp, they just throw this down and bam, like overnight or however long, they have a garden and they just come in and eat off this food. Well, you could do a lot of shit with that. And if suddenly you lost that resource, your neighbors could be eyeing you and your land. And so you're going to want to play nice with these guilds. Again, now we're having all these different layers of conflict and how these things interconnect with each other. So if the guild ends up getting threatened by one government, then they could just simply cut off the supply of the arcana, right? To ensure that their people can't be fed. And their armies. If they were politically wise, they could turn the people against each other or against the nation's leadership, right? So, you get the poor people to kill the poor people, something that's very common in history. Or you have a revolution where they destroy the leadership, and then when the new people get in, you either corrupt them or you let them understand the consequences of not bending the knee. Or, you could then even set up a situation where another nation comes after the nation maybe that's giving you problems. There you go. Like, this is all hypotheticals that we're working out to try to figure out all the ways these, particular presumptions worked. And as you see, like, God, there's so much that I can mine here. Like, I could create so many variations of stories off of this, or the very complicated world, just from this right here. So let's get to the end, because let's say, really, I wanted to do this not for the sake of world building, just to create myself a proof, an idea, or a theorem, right? And say, okay, this is typically how the world works. And so my conclusions were as follows. It seems to me that these are the factors of stability and instability, because remember, those were the ultimate aims of which we were trying to figure out. Instability is created when power is more concentrated. Makes sense, right? Because if the guild is the only thing that holds it, then you're going to have the guild having a lot of ability to create power, and then people on the outside are going to be wanting to get in to get that power. Insofar as I see it again. Factions will remain happy so long as their interests are being attended to and they have no means of achieving their greed. Makes sense, right? So stability will be maintained within the guild so long as all the outside factors, they can balance them. But if they can't balance them, then we have disequilibrium. And I think with centralized power, you see a lot of disequilibrium. Now, it can be, I do know, like, if you look at dictatorships, things can change on a dime, versus the democracy, things are kind of plodding and slow to get change moved, which both are pros and cons. If you have a benevolent dictator, which I don't know what the hell that is, then, they could do good things very quickly, versus a democracy, it takes its time. But, they can't just come in and take everything from you. So my other point was that stability also requires that no major weaknesses or strengths are to be inherited on one side or the other. Makes sense. If this place is weak, this isn't weak. There's not an equilibrium of power. There's kind of a power vacuum there. Nature abhors a vacuum. Things are going to happen. Makes sense. Stability requires a decentralization of power spread across multiple factions that check and balance each other. Now, here's an interesting story idea. What if I said I want this to be the end of my story, the resolution, and this problem was the beginning of my story, right? And then we established, well, this is the setting for my story, right? And then this right here is the beginning of my story, beginning of my setting. Well, then I've worked through all these and I choose which ones I want. And I say, let's create a story where let's see if they can figure out how to do this. And whether they succeed or not doesn't matter. But I have come up with a whole bunch of different ways in which I've shown whether I can they can succeed or fail based on these merits. So there you go. This is how to use my methodology, and hopefully now your methodology. Thank you, Euclid. To really enhance your world building. So one of the things I am going to try to do going forward is first use this in my videos, because I do think it gives me the ability to slow down and articulate the ideas that are going through my head. I have ADD, my thoughts can be very rapid, and I can make jumps that are 3 jumps ahead, and I can see it and I can feel it and I know that it's right. But I couldn't usually get you to, like, I would jump ahead, my uncle would be like, I don't understand how you got there. You need to break it down to me. And I was like, I don't know. I just feel this is right. Well, with the system now, I've stopped and gone, okay, hold on. Okay, what are my actualities? What are my axioms? What are my generalities? Okay, oh, it's this. Oh, yeah, and then this leads to this. This leads to this. Oh, yeah, and that. Or sometimes I can go to that idea and go, okay, what's the axiom there? And I work backwards and go, okay, this is the most general truth. Okay, yep, that's my, yeah, I have to understand this, and there, right? It's helped my brain slow down. So the first thing I'm going to do is start presenting you my videos in this kind of format. Second is that in the community tab, I'm going to start posting questions for you to go over. And in the comment section below, show your process. Now, it doesn't have to be as detailed as this, right? Because that'd be a long comment. But you could just make points and say, oh, we could presume this, and that would cause this. Or we could say, here is our proposition, right? And say this. And so the whole goal is that as a community, we can work together to create axioms and postulates and propositions and all these things, but to create thought experiments and to talk to each other and have fun. So there you go. If this has been useful, please leave a like and subscribe if you like this content, and hopefully we're going to get better from there. Somebody just left the house by slamming the door. And if you want to support this channel, like and subscribe, and then there's links down below, for instance, like my books, because I am a writer. So if you like reading and science fantasy, then check out my books. Until next time, I have been your archivist, and I'll talk to you later. Peace.